Hey everyone, and welcome to another edition of AI Insiders with AI Marketers Guild by Marketecture. I'm your host, David Berkowitz, and wearing an AI pendant because why not? We do weird things in the AI space and see how creepy the future is going to get. But yeah, this one's from friend.com, and it's very fitting because I've got a couple of old real friends, not pendant AI Samantha like from her friends on here. They've got Alexander and Todd have known a very long time and I've learned a ton from in the various waves of the digital space. And we've got agency and tech represented and a lot of different perspectives. And we're going to get deeper into GEO. I'll let you guys introduce yourselves and take it from here, but just so excited to learn from you. For those who haven't been here before, this is a community conversation and not a webinar. So as there are things you want to contribute, feel free, chat, come off mute, all kinds of good stuff. So look forward to learning what we have ahead here. And Alexander, Todd, you want to take it away?
Sure, I'll go first just because my enthusiasm cannot be contained. All the metaphors, the Yoda figurine in the background was inspiring me. The student trying to be on the same level as the teacher, who is you, David. I would like to one up my gratitude of all I've learned from you and your community over the years, and really excited to be here. And yes, I am VP of Data Science and AI at Huge, which is a digital agency that's been around for a while, and we've gone through several waves of rebirth, and now leaning into AI. And excited to talk to you about that more today. And Todd and I collaborate very closely with the platform he and his team are developing. So I'll pass it over to Todd.
Hello, everyone. I'm Todd. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Gumshoe, which is a platform to help brands understand what LMs think about them and what to do about it. As David mentioned, I've known David for a long time, and I see some recognized faces as well. Like, hi, Paul, Mr. Greenberg. Nice to see you. Um, and it's good to see folks I've worked with a long time across the space. And fundamentally, if you look at my career, I was involved in a range of startups going back 20 years in search and then social with a company called Lookery, and then in paid and programmatic, where David and I did some business together at a company called Samantha, which got sold to Teads, and now focused on the problem of how do brands make sure they capture as much attention with AI as possible. That thread has often been around customer acquisition, and that's the lens that we view the problem. I think marketers, you care about LLMs because you're hoping to get revenue and traffic out of them. And hopefully we're building a platform to help you do that.
Yeah, I think that's a good transition to share our material. I can,
And it is just such great perspective too, because it's like Todd. I mean, you and I have been like geeking out on blogs for decades, for instance, and
Yes,
like seeing some of the evolution now, where it's like having blogs where you produce as much content as possible is now cool again. It might not
it
be,
is. No, that's a great point.
you know,
You're no longer penalized for producing content.
so it might not be designed for or produced by humans, but it's a thing again.
Exactly.
great transition, yes, because in this presentation, we are going to talk about that very topic. In my role as a data scientist, helps, think about how websites are now data sources that get consumed by AI algorithms and how we can help everyone here survive and thrive in this new reality. So, typically, I work with Google Meet. I'm going to try sharing my window and going full screen. I'll kick us off, and then Todd will take over after about the halfway mark. So we're doing this live in real time. I'm gonna share my window, try to go full screen. Are people seeing
We see it.
Yeah, it's
you
good.
see the full screen presentation view?
Yeah.
We do.
Oh, okay, great.
Yeah, yeah, we see a little alert hovering over it. Yeah, there we go. Now it's perfect.
Perfect.
Okay. Thank you, everyone, for your grace. Um, but yes, we are going to talk about the role of websites in the age of AI. Some great art here provided from the Gumshoe team, which I think really illustrates well that, the how AI responds to your search just depends a lot on the person who's searching, which is kind of a new paradigm, which we will talk more about, as well as just more broadly for all the marketers in this call, how to think about the role of your website in the future. So this is us. We gave our introductions. I don't know, Todd, anything else to say on this slide? I think we look like cousins now from the Gen AI art, so that's great.
And I think, just as a quick comment, as Alex talks about the space, Alex has been working with Gumshoe as a platform, and so folks can ask his perspective on a practitioner trying to work in this space. And I think that's probably the important thing here, and from someone who is actually trying to manage this problem from an agency and a client perspective. And I think that's an important perspective because there's a lot of talk, I think, if you look online, like in LinkedIn, of folks like myself who are building things for this space versus the people who, like Alex, are actually trying to work in this space and impact clients and impact actual businesses. And so I think that's an important takeaway here. So if folks have questions for Alex and his perspective on the space, do not hesitate to ask because he's in the weeds of it and trying to figure it out day by day, like you all might be.
Yes, and we are well aware that this is no less than the fourth time lately that guests have come to the AI Marketers Guild and talked about generative engine optimization. So you might be familiar with this, but we want to take it a level deeper, and like Todd said, really share the in-depth perspective of what it's like, kind of boots on the ground, as they say.
Yeah, and I'll just add, I mean, I think my own bias and interest areas, I think there are like three areas that marketers really need to wrap their heads around now that are maybe a little different from 6 months ago. And where agentic AI is going for sure. I think like vibe marketing, vibe coding, vibe everything is very important right now. And that directly relates to GEO as that third area. They all intersect. And so having perspectives of what's happening in different pockets of the tech and agency side, different perspectives. It's almost like it's so critical for where marketing is going and like where are we going to get inbound from that I don't think we could talk about it enough, frankly. Like once a week isn't enough.
Uh, yes, because, we are entering a world where scientists are saying the future is just even more futuristic than previously predicted. Is this video showing up? I think
We are seeing it. Yes.
Oh, okay, that's great. That's excellent. Yes, I just love this quote because it's both very true and also you have no idea what it actually means, which I feel like is kind of the standard of all of the news coming out with AI. Every week you hear something and you're like, wait, this is real? This is a thing? I need to pay attention to this. So we're all just trying, to figure out how to survive this future that is even more futuristic than originally predicted. So what we're going to talk about today, websites. Let's dramatically talk about the maybe not a total death, like the near death and rebirth of websites. Then we'll deep dive on Geo and get into the platform that Todd and team have built, and then sort of step back to a higher level altitude just at the end to think, kind of looking ahead what it all means. And if there's one thing, you need to take away as marketers, like David was saying, your website, because it's now a data source for AI algorithms, it's more important than ever, even if fewer people go there. And we'll unpack, exactly what that means, how content is consumed differently by different audiences, AI agents, people, but ultimately what the opportunities are. So I know this is quite the expert group, but in case you are new to this topic, just wanted to give you an on-ramp to sort of what we're talking about here. So when we talk about the potential death and rebirth of websites, that's specifically referring to how AI and AI search, you might say colorfully, is eating the web. And there's some research that's been done by Gartner and other people predicting an overall drop in web traffic by 2026, basically for the first time ever since the modern, internet was born. And it's because of these different developments we're stepping through. We're seeing that up to 75% of searches can now be answered by generative AI, and that 60% searches now become what's called zero click, where someone gets the answer right there in the browser, and they don't need to click on to the website that provided the source to AI. And that can lead potentially to a really significant drop in traffic, especially, up to minus 70% for some more sort of niche content focused websites, because just the user journey is different now. But there may be opportunities that come with this disruption. And when we think about, how the web has evolved over the years, this isn't the first time that search has evolved. We started with, kind of Google search back in the late 90s, and then you had voice assistants coming out like Siri well over a decade ago. Visual search has been around for a good amount of time as well. But with ChatGPT and Gen AI search, you're really seeing how the role of websites is changing. A rising generation of AI native consumers. David mentioned his daughter. They're used to talking to a personalized AI and getting immediate answers for everything they ask for, rather than doing sort of the old traditional search process of stepping through many different screens. And ultimately, that points to how websites are changing both in form and function. And we're seeing websites and, the searches that bring people there as being more oriented around functional keywords. You say, male shoes, running, size 10, from moving away from the attention economy, where search is about showing a link and getting people to click on that, to websites as really being conversational, where with generative AI, as a brand, if you do this correctly, you can really anticipate the intention of what your consumers are looking for. And through things like structured content and turning your website into a context-rich answer source for AI generation, you can really pull people in to engage with your content in new ways. There's going to be a lot of disruption along the way, but a lot of opportunities. A good mental model is that, with the era of generative engine optimization, or GEO, there's a couple key steps to think about. And, there's been several people talking about GEO in this meeting, in this community. And what I've seen sort of in the trades and ad age and such is almost a little bit of a mini backlash against GEO. People are saying, isn't this just SEO with a new name? How is it materially different? So this is how it's materially different. So on kind of the left side of this slide, user asks a query and AI makes a search. This is where traditional SEO still matters, because AI generative search engines underneath the hood are search engines. So all the stuff that websites had to do for SEO is still vital. It's still critical. So we can get that out of the way. But what's different, what's new, is that now, because AI summarizes the answer and presents it back to the user, there's a whole new field emerging, and their terminology is shifting. Some people call this answer engine optimization, AEO. But I think Geo is good because it speaks to the landscape more holistically. You have this whole domain around what AI actually does to consult multiple sources, to summarize them, to decide which one gets ranked in what priority order, and then present that back to the user. And when we get into Gumshoe, we'll be able to see a lot of richness around how that works. And ultimately, that gives us, this kind of, hopefully, a holistic view of how traditional SEO and GEO kind of work together.
Another way to think about it, using this funnel analogy, is if you think about the traditional marketing funnel, the top, which is discovery, and then the middle consideration and the bottom conversion. Search managed discovery, like Google would manage own discovery and then hand you off as a browser to a website for consideration and then conversion. And what the AI engines are doing is they're managing discovery and consideration and then handing people off at the last step for conversions that you can't convert on an LLM, as I think everyone is aware. And so that change is, I think, impactful, and why, the instance of that click goes away and is now made within the LLMs. And so that's where I think the bulk of this conversation speaks to, which is, okay, if the LLMs are now managing consideration, what do I do about that?
Well, we'll give you people some answers and a couple within the course of this meeting. So don't worry. The question, it's not a rhetorical question. We'll dive in. Um, yes, moving forward. So now we're getting into, kind of the so what. We're just talking about the funnel and generative search, is the new top of funnel, as Todd said so well. When someone does come to your site, they will get there from having started a conversation with AI, and they'll expect to continue that conversation on your website. And that'll extend to the third implication here around expectation of content being personalized and multimodal. And now we're getting into some, big picture thinking around the role of websites in the age of AI, because people are just used to sort of this multimodal, being able to get different types of content formats from a single search. You can see this on Google search for a while, and this is gonna increasingly come into websites and be the desired experience paradigm that the browsers are looking for, the human browsers, I mean. But you'll also need to think about how content is consumed, not just by humans, but also by AI, and what are the different implications to present something that gets to create something that gets indexed by AI, brings people to your site, but is still ultimately compelling and navigable by humans when we get there. So we're about to dive into kind of the first horizon of transformation here around conversational search, around generative search engines. People have a conversation with AI, and then the website visit follows. That's where we're going to spend most of our time today, deep diving on that. There'll be future horizons of transformation to come around conversational websites, as I was referencing, and Todd said this very well, the journey gets shorter instead of all these phases happening like discovery, consideration, conversion. AI is taking a lot of that and bringing people more quickly to what they want. But that makes that journey for people unique, and deeply compelling for your brand if you do it right. And what we won't touch on as much today, but perhaps topic for our next AI Marketers Guild presentation in 6 months or a year, is autonomous websites. When websites are agents and multi-agent systems that connect with other websites, and it really changes the role of the human in thinking about what they want and experience in that experience. And David's done some writing with some people in this area, and just how brands need to think differently around governance and interaction rules to personify themselves to users when they think about AI. But for today, I think we are gonna zoom in a little bit on some more immediate, near term, kind of the current horizon of transformation that we're in. And so Todd mentioned that I'm a user and a practitioner of GEO with the help of Todd's platform. And some of the things that I think are really interesting that are key for people to understand what's different about GEO. I'll just speak to them quickly, and then we'll be able to see as we look through Gumshoe how this actually manifests in the metrics, the content, the recommendations you get. So, diving in for this expert audience who've heard several presentations around GEO, say there's three key things you need to consider for understanding what's different now. There's training versus inference. There's sources of knowledge and the actual search string. These are idiosyncrasies, you might call it, of how generative search engines work that are these are your pro tips. And when you start to understand these, soon you will become a geomaster following in the footsteps of David's Yoda figurine in the background when his camera shifts up. So with generative search engines, like we mentioned, we have the search engine and the generative piece. Hopefully, people are familiar with these terms by now of training versus inference. But what we mean by this is, famously when ChatGPT came out and changed the world a few years ago, it was very clear that told people like, oh, my knowledge only goes up to, November 2022, so I don't understand what happened more recently. And this knowledge cutoff is still very much a thing, the training piece. But of course, the models now are much better at searching. And when they get a question that they're not sure about, they look for new information. That's what inference means, making a prediction. And ultimately, the answer displayed to the user comes back as a combination of those two things. And this is a really big topic to sort through because sometimes the model, will answer a question on your brand because it just knows your brand if you're a classic brand and you've been around for a while. But if you're a newer brand, you need to think about, well, how do I get the LLM search engines to discover me? And this is where some data that the Gumshoe platform has provided, which is just so awesome that I talk about it and many opportunities because it's so helpful, is that different models consult different sources of information. So OpenAI, the ChatGPT models tend to consult Wikipedia, but the Google model family, Gemini, consult YouTube, not surprisingly, as their main source, but different publication, different sites, Reddit, NerdWallet. So a big part of geo is understanding how model behavior is different. A Gumshoe platform does a great job with this, and we'll get into it that just in another slide or two, and understanding, based on your audience and which LLMs they may be using, kind of how you want to structure your content to stand out. And the last thing to keep in mind, which is also kind of a heady concept, but this idea of a search string. So with pre-generative search, you put some keywords into a browser, you click search, the search engine is looking exactly for those keywords. But with these generative search engines, they are doing multiple iterations of the search string you provide to the search engine, and they may be adding additional data about you. So if you've been having a conversation with the LLM, they'll get your intent from the question you asked, but they'll also understand context. As someone you may have talked about season, time of day, time of year, where you are at that time. The LLM is going to proactively kind of include that into what it's searching for. It might also know your history and preferences if you're a power user of ChatGPT and it has saved memories about you, and you say you're searching for a restaurant, it might have a saved memory that knows you like, Italian food or Thai food, and that might be proactively included. It's these things that, as brands, having a nuance of these LLM behaviors can be really key. And ultimately, the reason that people are talking about conversational content now is because of this search string mechanic that the LLM will search for many different iterations of your question based on what you asked it. And so having conversational responses, conversational content that the LLM can pull back to that dialogue with the user is really another pro tip for getting your brand and your content to stand out. And I think that is a good point to switch over to the Gumshoe platform. And Todd, if you wanna, I will stop
I will
sharing if you
start
wanna
sharing.
take the mic. Okay. I'm trying to stop sharing how now I'm getting a weird thing. Okay, there
I
we
think
go.
you're
I think I
now
was able to cut
you're
it
now
out.
sharing, and then or you've stopped sharing. And so what I'm showing everyone, you can actually also follow along and look. This is a link that is publicly available. I just shared it in the chat. And what this is a dashboard, sort of a macro stats dashboard, looking across the entire usage of Gumshoe. Gumshoe has had close to 4,000 companies sign up, which makes us, I believe, the most popular AI optimization knowledge understanding platform out there. And so what you're looking at are stats from all the reports and chats. We've generated over 10 million chats, and we use that as sort of how do we understand what the LLMs do and what they understand. And so what you're looking at here, the first graph, and this is the stats that the chart you saw earlier from Alex a couple of slides ago, came from this dashboard. So Alex has had access to this, and so a lot of his understanding has come from this. And as marketers, this is a good place to learn what are the LLMs actually doing and what data do I have. One of the things that I do want to say is that there is no publicly available data set from any of the LLMs about what users are doing on them. They are locking that information down extremely tightly. And it makes sense. OpenAI doesn't want Google and Gemini to know what's happening on their platform. Perplexity doesn't want OpenAI knowing what's on its platform. And so there is no equivalent to like the keyword tool that Google shares. There's no equivalent to Google's search console. You're a little bit on your own and having to rely on third parties like Gumshoe to understand what's going on in the world. So this first chart shows you what are the types of sites that the LLMs are linking to. What's the category of sites? And the good news as a brand owner, that the LLMs actually prefer your sites over others. And it makes sense because in a lot of ways, the way we think about AI search and what's going on with it is that it is solving a lot of the problems of traditional search, which has been SEO baited to death. How many times have we just tried to look up a dimension, like I just bought a new TV and I just need to know how wide it is, and I go put that into Google and I get an infinite number of links with top 10 TVs of this or that or what have you. I just can't find the actual information I'm looking for. And AI search is doing a much better job of trying to solve for that. Like, oh, you actually want the dimensions? I'll give it to you. And it turns out they're looking for canonical and authoritative sources of that information. And when it comes to products, the brand itself is often that source. So when Alex said the rebirth of websites, this is a point that kind of speaks to that as well. That first section, which is your websites will get cited by the LLMs, especially if it's related to the product and category that users are interested in. So that's the good news, is it is absolutely a basis for what the LLMs are looking for. So you see that 40%, 30 to 40% of all the links that the LLMs cite as the reason for their answers come from brand sites. And I think that's a really important takeaway to this as a marketer. Your influence isn't ending. In many ways, it's going to increase because you're not going to have to worry about competing as much with just SEO baiting. Today, if you deliver good canonical information, the models want that. And so that's a good news sort of, I think, transition. Now, of course, there's other sites and so forth that come from that. The next thing you see here in this page is the top domains by category. And then I'll scroll down. You can look at the by model, which Alex gave you some highlights from. And so here's the charts that speak to that. Like, what are the models linking to and what are they thinking about? One of the interesting, you see, right, with AI overviews, which is the Google search, and AI overviews is not strictly a Gemini model. It is a variation on Gemini. So when people ask, if I just focus on Gemini, am I going to capture AI overviews? Somewhat, it's probably about 80% the same, but the Google search team is tuned for their own purposes a Gemini model. So you see some slight iterations and variations between them. One of the things you'll notice here is that, like you see Zillow showing up highly. That's because there's some real estate related customers of ours, and this is generated through people who are using our platform. So this data is biased to that customer set. But I think the important thing that comes out of there, which is, again, Zillow's great for traditional SEO. And also, as Alex mentioned, that doesn't go away, that still has value. And I think that's a good example of how traditional SEO still has value, even in a GEO, AEO, AIO, LMMO world. Pick your favorite acronym. One of the other things you will see here is YouTube, very popular, like on Perplexity. The number one domain is that they refer to is YouTube. And one of the things I always tell people is a quick hack is A, make sure every video you have ever made is on YouTube. And second, this is important, make sure you've turned on automated transcription. We believe that it's the transcripts, not automated speech recognition, which is referred to as ASR, is what's driving this. And you see this in the other models, it's YouTube transcripts. And also that means your descriptions on YouTube, incredibly important. Make sure you're being thoughtful about what you're saying there and thinking of the prompts and the keywords you want to be in that description, because it's going to be important for AEO, GEO, whatever you want. The next thing here.
Can I just ask one super tactical question, Todd?
Please.
Just with because you're giving like a very simple potential fix, or help. Is that just like a standard YouTube setting? Like what do we need to know about?
Yes, transcriptions is a standard setting. When you're uploading, it'll be one of the modals. And some people have turned them off. Historically, it wasn't always on early on, and now it is. It's an option. When you go into your YouTube settings, you're uploading videos. It's one of those like locations and everything else. It's one of the boxes there, and you have to make sure it's checked. It's not. In my experience, sometimes it's checked, sometimes it's not. I can't remember if it's an automated setting or not. But as you go through the settings when you're uploading your video, that'll be one of the modal dialogues, and it's under, I think, the advanced settings. You scroll down like location and other things. Good question, David. But it is an obvious one of those line items. But if you ever uploaded YouTube video, you'll see there's like 50 boxes that you have to go through and check to make sure your videos are classified. So it's a good question to bring up.
Yeah, that's why I don't want to miss anything that's like so simple that can get us one step
Correct. It's one of those great things you can do. The good news is you can do some simple things, and it can be helpful in that regard. And so the next thing you're seeing here is we talked about traditional SEO, and people, you probably have read things that said, hey, I hear ChatGPT and Perplexity and Anthropic are just crawling Google's search index. Yes, and the but here is what you're seeing here. And so what we do is we look up to traditional Google ranking of the URLs that we see cited in chats that we're generating with the LLMs. And so what you see here is that 50 to almost 90+% of the links have a traditional Google ranking below 21, meaning they're on page 3 or beyond. So what this is telling you is that just being popular on Google's results does not mean you're going to be popular on GEO. Going back to my point of the models trying to solve for the problems of traditional search, the top 10 links, page 1, are often SEO baited to death. And what's great about AI is they're machines, and they have infinite patience. So they can go through every page of the search results and try to find the best and most authoritative or canonical link, not just what's most popular. And so the good news is, as a marketer, we all know how hard it is to rank for things with Google because you're battling this like SEO complex. But if you're good about putting authoritatively canonical information out and do it in a, Alex talked about this, in a structured way, then you can be surfaced by the LLMs. And I think that's a good news. It's no longer about being the most popular kid in school. It's about being the kid who's good at studying and the good about producing homework, and you're going to get rewarded for being the smart kid. And so I think this is one of the things is like, unlike people, like 1 out of 100 people go to page 2 on Google, 1 out of 1,000 go to page 3, 1 out of 10,000 go to page 4, and no one goes to page 5. The LLMs, they're machines. They have infinite patience. So they can look through 1,000 links, 100,000 links, and find the best information. Now, one last chart here is, this is what is the recency of the cited links within GEO results. And this is kind of as a marketer, your world is going to change in a huge way, which is that 51% of all the links we've cited were published in the last 90 days. That's why there's a spike as you get closer today. This is a histogram. 90+% were published in the last 12 months. Where Google tended to like things that were a little bit more evergreen, like had sort of fine wine, would age 1 or 2 years, get some link juice built, and sort of that was kind of the optimal timeline, which made SEO optimizing for SEO a bit of a challenge because you had to wait a long time to have an impact. Well, the average age of a cited article that we have calculated is 86 days old, and it's declining 10 to 15% quarter over quarter. So next quarter, it's going to be 78 days, and then 70 days, and then 62 and 54, and it's going to move more and more to near real time. So you as a marketer are going to have to be thinking about, if I'm going to be producing content, and think of the content, and we'll talk about this, as really an instruction set to the models at a pace and velocity that you're just not used to, where it's going to be, we expect this to get to near real time, and your ability to basically produce content, engage with the models, teach them, inform them, is going to go from an 86-day cycle today to days in 12 to 18 months. And I think that's one of the really interesting impacts of this is you're not going to be able to sit back. And if you thought publishing a couple of articles a month, like I've talked to some clients, like, yeah, I'm going to really try to produce 3 to 5 things a month. And my answer to that is, well, in the future, you're going to need to do 3 to 5 things an hour, just so you're aware. And that's, I think, the world that's sort of coming here is this is a stat that kind of points to that. And so if you've heard about producing content, am I going to publish content? Yes, and you have to produce it all the time in an ongoing basis. So in terms of, so what's informing how we view LLMs is this sort of research, which looks at what is happening, what do we see across, and again, this is across 10 million prompts. And so I'll show you how we generate those and what this, now, the good news is any of you can go to Gumshoe, you can run a report for free, you don't need to put in a credit card, it's not time-based, you'll have access to this forever. Feel free to sign up and play with Gumshoe. And ultimately what you're going to do is you're going to produce something that looks like this. This is a report that we've run for Lululemon. And one of the things I'll show you is there's a lot of things on this page. And one of the things I'm going to point out here is Alex brought up this concept of personas, and I'm going to talk about what we mean with that, but you'll see that here represented. And what you're going to see is the stats you see are the percent of times that an LLM mentioned the brand, in this case Lululemon, in response to a conversation with this persona. I'm going to talk about what that looks like and how you do that. So you're going to come to Gumshoe. This is, you'll click the search app.gumshoe.ai, and the next thing you'll do is you're going to enter a brand name, and then the next thing you're going to see here is you're going to get a description. We're verifying that the company is correct. One of the things you'll see as you go through this is we're going out to multiple LLMs and pulling that information back, so you have an understanding of at least what at the very first step, what do they understand my business? One of the things that Alex talked about in one of his slides is that in terms of how the LLMs generate answers, and he talked about inference versus search in terms of how they're doing that. And sometimes it's pre-trained and sometimes it's real-time search-based. One of the things here is if you start to see things that we pull out of the LLMs and it's wrong, here's another thing. If you don't provide the answer to an LLMs, they don't say, I don't know. They hallucinate. They make it up. And so as a marketer, you better be answering every possible question and putting that answer online, because in the way you want it to be answered, because if you don't, the LLMs will make up an answer for you. So I think that's an important takeaway here, is that you can't just sit back and say, I don't need to do that. That's not important. If it's being asked about your company, you better be prepared to ultimately do that. The next step here in the way we do things is we run reports at a product level for a couple of reasons. One, how do consumers do search? They don't search for companies, they search for products. Two, most of you in the marketing world, often, like if you're a brand manager or product manager, you own a product. So let's make sure we understand your point of view. And then three, the LLMs are so specific, right? Their goal is to answer as specifically as possible. They drive people to this level of specificity in their interactions with users. And so that's the way that we take and think about this is we're doing things at the product level. And our point of view, just run different reports for different products. That's again, our perspective on it. So the next thing we're going to then do is we're going to generate personas. And you'll see here, and this is based upon the business that was in and then the product that was selected, we're going to generate these personas. And this is incredibly important because if you want to get in the shoes of an end customer and how they use ChatGPT, you kind of have to mimic them. You have to simulate them. And so our point of view is and we're unique in this regard, is if you don't simulate this sort of personal perspective, you're not really going to understand what LLMs are saying to your target customers. Because the minute you create an account on ChatGPT or the other LLMs, they're taking your email and building a profile of you as a user. They want to know where you work, where you went to school, if you work at a business, what's affiliated with it, and in part so they can flatter you for things you're affiliated with. If you want to see a great description of this, is watch the season premiere of South Park from this fall, and how Stan's dad, Randy, basically falls in love with ChatGPT as his girlfriend because all it does is flatter him all day long and say how wonderful his ideas are. And so if you, as a marketer, you can't just ask the LLMs what it thinks about your products because it's going to say it loves them and you're awesome, when in the reality it could be saying something very different to your target customers. And so the way we do this is we've registered as a chat application with the LLMs. And so we basically say, hey, LM, I've got a user with this profile with this prompt. And then ask that. And we have a real conversation between ourselves and the LLMs, which is effectively turning these personas into simulated, or the buzzy word. You'll hear this a lot, synthetic users, right? You'll hear terms like synthetic market research. These personas get turned into synthetic users. And this is important because, as you'll see when we look at some of the results here, they really customize their answers based on the profile of the user. And which makes total sense. We've all had this experience of how the difference between Google and the LLMs can have a back and forth with the user. They can drive to a very specific answer, and they're trying to be. After that is we're going to generate prompts for each of these users. And what's happening here is that we're going out to them all, whether it's personas, whether it's the prompts, we're going out to the LLMs, multiple LLMs, and working with them to say, okay, who do you think? And the personas are who they thought were the top target customers for your product. The next step is, all right, those users need to ask prompts. And so we generate prompts based, again, working with the LLMs. What do you think are the most important and relevant prompts based upon your history of working with these users? And also we've experienced having generated, as I said, over 10 million of these chats over the last 6 months, and have a lot of experience in terms of what are the types of questions we're seeing. And so this is an area of big discussion and debate, is, are these realistic? The answer is no one really knows yet how often these types of questions are being asked. We're sort of using our best guesstimates for the time being. And so our point of view is that, great, we're going to generate these prompts. One thing also, if you're generating prompts and you're simulating users, those prompts better sound as realistic, as human as possible, because the LLMs will answer questions differently if they think you're a bot.
And can
So
I just
go ahead, Alex.
and just to add, I think if you manage a website, a really important consideration is to take the insights capability that Gumshoe provides and the research on potential queries, and then map that back to your own site analytics, because these are meant to be leading indicators of the types of, topics, audiences, content that your site may be able to engage AI search engines with. So just thinking on how you can kind of close the loop on that is really critical.
That's a great point. And to the point of hallucinations, right? If you don't have coverage for those prompts, you better create coverage. Like, you should have content that speaks to every one of the prompts that we generate, because that's sort of your best guesstimate as to what's happening in terms of what the LMs are looking for. And another great place to look at your customer service logs. Look at the questions that are being asked to your customer success or customer service systems, like whether you're using Intercom or Zendesk, and there's now a lot of automated Q&A back and forth. But then also look at what the chat records that are being asked to your customer service people, because if they're asking you, they're asking an LLM. And so that's another input here for the types of prompts you're seeing. And we're actually building out some functionality to process those logs and use that as another point of prompt generation. But that's the types of things you'd be thinking about. And then to Alex's point, map your GA, your web analytics, whether it's Adobe Analytics or GA, Google Analytics, look at that mapping. Are we seeing coverage between those types of questions and our content? And if you don't see an overlap, that's a great area where you can be producing content to solve for that. So this is, after we submit the prompts, you'll be able to do this in real time yourselves, and we'll have hundreds of chats across the different LLMs, and we'll take and parse those answers. And what you see here is this first stat is the percent is basically your share of answers, right? What percent of the chats was your brand mentioned in? So in this case, Lululemon, the yoga apparel, 65%. And then you get to see your competitive standing, what percent were your competitors mentioned? Because the other thing is the LLMs aren't starting with just one answer, one company. They tend to start with 3 to 8, and then through some back and forth, we'll narrow it down to a recommendation. And the important thing here is David likes to talk about the agentic future in shopping, what this competitive landscape is showing you, which is today it's showing you are the LLMs recommending, but more importantly, as agentic shopping takes off, and they're going to say, what are they going to put in the cart? Like if you use Perplexity's browser, you can see this live today. What are they going to put in your cart? They're going to put in the top recommendation. And so what you're really trying to then understand is my brand getting recommended and therefore ultimately put in the cart when that automation happens with agentic shopping. And so if I'm not the number one preference for that persona, then I'm not going to be the what gets put in that cart. And so what you see here in the next area is persona visibility, which is more importantly, remember we turned those personas into synthetic users and we had unique chats with them. And you'll see if I'm this case is the range of response rates of recommendation rates go from a high of 79% to a low of 14%. So this is really showing you, are the models, the LLMs, really doing a good job of personalizing answers? And the answer is we see this sort of distribution. This is actually one of the more severe distributions, but we see this range of some, it makes total sense. We have some users we do better with and others we don't. As marketers, I think we inherently understand that. And so you have then the ability to, okay, what do I do and what do I understand? And then you can go in and look and see what's being said. And so what we've done is we've parsed out the brand mentions. So you can then see what exactly did the LM say back to this user. And so I have this opportunity then to kind of understand the messaging. And I think the biggest, most interesting thing about this is that you realize this is a product marketing, a product messaging problem. Unlike traditional SEO, which was very technical, do I include the right keywords in a link? It was a lot of link structure things. It was about page structure. It was about this. But now the right way we think about LLMs, which is you see this, is think of them as like your sales rep in a store. Right? You imagine Dick's Sporting Goods and there's a sales rep at the front of the store and we've all seen that shoe wall behind them. And if someone walks in the door, let's say David walks in or Alex walks in or I walk in, we're going to get different recommendations saying, oh, I need a new pair of shoes. That sales rep, think of that sales rep as the LLM. Before they pull a pair of shoes off the wall, they're going to try to figure out who you are. Are you a hiker? Are you a golfer? Are you a walker? Do you live in New York like David? Do you live in SoCal like Alex? Do you live in the Pacific Northwest like me? We're going to get different recommendations. Well, how does that sales rep at the front of Dick's Sporting Goods know what to recommend for which customer? They get trained. Nike sends in a rep and does a training with those salespeople. Reebok does, Asics does, Hoka does. And so think of the LLMs that rep, and as a marketer, I'm going to need to build content now to train that. And so when they regurgitate back to the end customer, you can see this is what they're saying. And then the goal here is trying to understand then what I ultimately do about that. And so the part of what was being said earlier by Alex is I'm trying to get an understanding of, okay, where am I strong, where am I weak? And so what you're seeing here is this is a heat map of the what visibility or what recommendation rate between different topics and personas. And I can look at it also by model and trying to understand, don't you love live demos when something doesn't click through? And here it is. And so I want to look at different models. And so one of the interesting things here is you'll see vast differences in recommendation rates between models. That's another thing. The models are absolutely tuning. Like, think of them as cars. One of them's a ChatGPT is trying to be more like the minivan. Perplexity is trying to be more like, its focus is more like the dedicated shopper, the very e-commerce focus. Anthropic's more like the tech bros model. And so Gemini is different. And so you start to see these things surface. The other thing I kind of want to point out here is these last 3 models down here, as an example, are real-time search-based models. Some of the models, like DeepSeek Reasoner and Anthropic, which is Claude, are more pre-trained models. They don't rely as much on real-time internet search. And you're starting to see differences in your recommendation rate between real-time search models and inference, meaning pre-trained models. And so one of the things that's driving that is you can look, and if you look at the crawlability of your pages, if you have a page that is very difficult to crawl, and one of the things we can do is we analyze and look how crawlable your pages are. And this is, by the way, great for Alex's business, right? Huge has a great website development practice. this is great for that. Is everyone's going to need to make their sites more crawlable, because if it is difficult for the LLMs to crawl, they're going to recommend your site less. And this is kind of the stats that speak to that. And we help identify like what are the technical things you need to do to improve your site to make it more crawlable, so that you're not getting penalized, because the LLMs basically are saying, look, if it's hard for me to crawl your site, I'm going to bounce and go to the next one. It's expensive and I don't have time necessarily to go fudge with that. And I think that's one of the really important things that you can be doing and thinking about, which is one, am I generating the content to cover that? And one of the things we now do is we offer you the ability to generate content. Am I covering the topics and personas? And this is a mechanism to do that. And I can select a persona and topic intersection and then generate content. Remember the chart before in Research Zero, when we said it's linking to your business sites? It's linking to FAQs, knowledge articles like blog posts and how-to guides. Those are key areas where you can be recommending. And in addition, we know it's recommending the things like YouTube, and we can recommend the types of content you should be posting to that as well. And so you have that ability to, oh, what's my map for then what to do? One of the things we help do is generate examples of the content you should be doing. This is based on us analyzing those chats and basically understanding what are the LLMs saying versus, and then as a brand, what do you need to be saying in response so you show up next time? And one of the things we're now generating are these are sample posts and these are sample subreddits we are recommending you post this to. And then to your point about YouTube, we're also generating, this is a prompt you can give to VO3 to generate a video that speaks to this topic and persona nexus point. So you can be making sure, Alex said, make sure you're covering all these areas, make sure you have content to go do that. Well, tools like ours are now giving you a roadmap, right? The report is your roadmap of what do I need to be talking about, right? This heat map is, here's the things I need to be talking about. And then we're a tool to then help you solve for that. The next thing that you want to be thinking about are, okay, what are all the places that are showing up? And then how do I manage outreach to those to make sure I'm getting mentioned? And then we're helping you understand, like, what are the sites that are getting mentioned? So I can go back and then look at that content, and potentially this becomes part of a PR outreach strategy. Go reach out to this writer and have them suggest content. One of the next things we're going to be doing is generating emails that you can be sending out to these writers based upon the persona and topic, saying, hey, writer, talk about these things when you talk about my brand in the future. And so that's the type of information that you can get from a platform like ours in terms of what do LMs think about my business and then what to do about it. The things you can do about it is make sure your site is optimized entirely. Two, make sure you've got the right content coverage and make sure you're going to answer those questions and obviously generating that. The other thing I want to make sure is the recency. One thing I'm going to point out is here's a site that is using our platform, and they're generating 25 to 50 FAQs a week. And so one of the things I want to point out here is that what people aren't doing, a real tactical thing, David, is I'm going to point out most FAQs are anonymous. That era needs to end. LLMs like authoritative authors. So what they're doing now is we're recommending every piece of content should have a writer with a bio and academic or industry credentials. Also, make sure you tell the models that your content is human in the loop reviewed, and it should be what's the date it was published and the date it was updated. Recency can be updated. So right now, they're actually outside the 90-day window. They need to go back and update these. And so put all of these things at the top of every piece of content, including FAQ answers. And so those are the types of little things that can help you now in this world order. So you make sure you have the content, make sure it's got the right coverage, and make sure it's got an author and it's got a recency. And these are some of the cues that you can give to the models to help them understand who and what you are. The good news is an example of what's happening right now is that we see this now starting to see with our customers. This is actually came from last night. One of our customers sent this to us, which is here's an example of a prompt that they were targeting. And you see it now includes, this is the company that did this is called Sturdy.ai, they're a startup. And you can then see the FAQ that they generated to go rank for that and how this, and the other thing, because this is now happening within 86 days, they published this about 4 weeks ago and it's already starting to show up in the models. That's the other thing is don't wait, start now, right? You're going to be behind the curve in terms of what the models are looking for and how they can manage your business and your relationship with your business. And so I think the real way to think about this is think of, whether it's a platform like ours or others, these are platforms to help manage a relationship with the models. And so what's going to happen is you see these personas and these content, David talked about this, that persona is eventually going to turn into an agentic representative for you. A year from now, a year and a half from now, that persona will be a real-time agent having a conversation, basically talking in real time to the model, saying, hey, here's what's going on with my business, and here's how you should be thinking about these products for my brand. And so that future is coming fast and furiously. And so here's sort of the data and backdrop of how we think about that and how we're thinking about how you build a machine. That's kind of what we're doing to go solve for that. And so hopefully that gives you some good perspectives. I said, every one of you can go sign up for free. You can play with it. You can have fun. You're not going to get asked to enter anything. Just don't use a Gmail, use your corporate, because we block some features because there's too many spam bots that now use Gmail accounts as a front end for them. And so we're currently, so just use your work emails and you get access to all the features that you see here. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Alex.
So well, yeah. I mean, we're at time now, and yeah, that wound up flying by, and appreciate you guys sharing all this. I think if you want to leave your contact info for any questions, or just leave that in chat for best ways to find you. Yeah, it's super informative. Any links you want to follow up with, you want to send my way for where to sign up for this, or any slides, other materials you want us to share with the group, we're happy to do so. And then by all means, in the Slack, any kinds of questions and things like that come up, happy to have you share more too, and keep furthering our knowledge on this. So yeah, it's incredibly informative, and so grateful for both your points of view, and I think it's so helpful coming together, and appreciate everyone being here. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you again.
hey, thank you. Have a great rest of your week. Happy New Year to those celebrating, and yeah, great to see everyone. We'll be back. We got a full schedule coming up next couple months, so we'll be here. We'll be here every week.
Awesome.
All right.
Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you.